You are aware of the TT and its heritage. It's one of the oldest road races in the world. It's pretty much been born and has grown up during the age of oil. First race was in 1907. And one of its main notes of fame was probably the racing circuit that put the Japanese motorcycle industry into the world market. If any of you ever see those adverts from Honda, where you have Soichiro Honda, the briefcase, and talking about how winning is improves the breed and all of that footage, all those pictures of him on a race circuit is on the Isle of Man. And in fact, this year is the 50th anniversary of Honda's first win, and it took them about 10 years, I think, from the time they arrived to the time they were winning every class of that event. The date for this year's race is now closed, so where we are today is we have 24 entries, all of which are zero carbon and clean emission vehicles from 7 countries, of which I'm very proud to say there's 10 of them from the US. But the other really interesting thing is that they are companies who you've never heard of, and that's probably an indication of how big a revolution this could be, because the people in the game are probably often the last people to know the rules have changed. And there's a real element of that. My previous history is in consumer electronics. When Chris talked about the iPod and what that did, I have some experience of that. And it's happening here. It's happening at a pace and on a scale much bigger than I think is really appreciated in the US. I think there's an element of that. The point that Chris Criselli made about how much respect we have for gasoline and how that drives our thinking. Today we are what, $7 a gallon? Is that right? And the rest, yeah. So that's where we are today. $7 a gallon. And you've got to understand that really puts a perspective on how important we think about where we're moving. So things like bioethanol or biofuel or whatever, those things are important, but really we need a much more definitive solution in terms of where we want to go. Which is why we did the zero carbon and why we set our stall out so far ahead. It seemed to me that if you were going to try something and fail, might as well try something epic, really. No point in failing something which is just an incremental step. It's been an incredible experience in what we've learned. One of the things that isn't really appreciated, and especially if you're in the industry, is how much you take for granted if you're dealing with combustion engine. And it's not just with racing. I mean, with racing, motorsports, there's a lot of different agendas, a lot of different priorities of the different people involved to make it happen. So from scrutineers to safety officers to how the pit stops, how the paddocks, we've had to really slog through all of that. We've also took this opportunity to really redefine the rule book. Again, one of the things I discovered is that rules are often written in response to a particular moment in time. But as the years go by and the context is lost, the rules somehow seem to stick. So we had a rule book, which was, an FIM rule book, which has evolved over, I don't know how many years. And we had this opportunity to really gut it. And one of the things that we did is we moved the focus from being a prescriptive, this is how you do it, rather than just, and what we focused on is really, this is what we wanted to achieve. So the point that was made this morning about the curves and how unfortunate it is that those are limited, I absolutely agree with that. What we're doing is too new, and not just what TTx, just this whole area of moving beyond petroleum is too new to be prescriptive at this point. You've got to allow people to innovate and really grow. So I'm very proud that we've brought in a number of new innovations, some of which you'll see on the tracks this year, some of which will be coming next year. Some of the stuff that we've started, we now have teams who've committed to a multi-year program of motorsport. Particularly motorcycles. I'll give you some quick examples. For the first time, we're allowing traction from more than one wheel. So traditionally, you've had a motorcycle where all the traction comes from the back wheel, which actually makes a lot of sense, really only in one vector. But as soon as you're moving in any other direction, the idea of having a few 5%, 10% of your traction coming from the front wheel suddenly really changes the dynamics of how you enter turns, how you come out of turns, and so on. We've also redefined some of the rules around streamlining. Now that's an interesting example because in the 60s, when frankly we didn't know that much about streamlining, across the mountain circuit there'd be crosswinds and they would have disastrous effects at high speeds. Well, we've learned a lot since then, yet the rules were still stuck from the 60s. So again, we've had a chance to redefine that. Obviously, we've worked a lot with the energy side, how the batteries are packaged, how the safety systems in the event of a catastrophic incident, how we deal with that. We've really worked hard to solve those problems. So what we thought would be just a nice race has turned into an organisation. So I can't believe I employ people now to do this. I think we've really changed some of the thinking that's happening out there in industry. Whatever happens to this event, I think on June 13th, things are not going to be the same. Some of our competitors have chemistries or battery systems which were developed specifically just for them. Some of them are running prototype battery systems, which are not even available in the market now. And what's interesting, and what should be, I think, maybe a bit of a wake-up call for you guys, is even the American teams are running technology which is not American. Most of the batteries are from either Korea, Taiwan, and Japan. The main controller systems, which are the key components, is out of China. And the motors, interesting enough, are coming out of India. Now these are companies, these motor teams had the choice to go anywhere in the world, and that's where they went to get their stuff. And one of the things that we've had is the introduction of bringing a whole new cast of players really to the motorsport scene. One of the battery makers, for example, is the largest supplier of batteries to Samsung. So suddenly if you innovate, and we talk about how to make money from all this, when you innovate, I suppose as a SEMA member, your market is really other SEMA members, I suppose, other combustion engine applications. I develop a new valve, or I develop a new injection system, or whatever, well, who am I going to sell that to? But these guys have taken a different view. Basically, these motorbikes are running glorified batteries that you will find in your iPods, in your laptops, in your cameras, in whatever. Essentially, their market is any mobile power application. Think about how radically changed that is. There was a point made earlier this morning's presentation by Extract, and they made a, sorry, I forgot the chap's name, but Adrian, right? He made the interesting point about gearboxes, of how, you know, for road racing, for road legal, the refinement threshold is such that you have to compromise your performance for motorsport terms. And actually what we did very early on is we decided to build our own electric motorbike. And you'll see a picture of that in the brochure. That particular bike does 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. And it tops out around 110 miles per hour. And it actually does it. That's not... that's the other thing I've learned about motorsports. There's hot air and there's real air. Right? But it actually does do those speeds. It actually does that performance. And I mentioned the road legal aspect of it because what we then did is we took this bike that we built and we took it through the road certification process for the UK. So that bike is now road legal. It's taxed, it's insured, you can ride on the road as a regular thing. And the interesting observation that we learned from that was if you don't have to worry about noise, you don't have to worry about emissions, suddenly the line between what you're racing on the track to what you're racing on the road is literally just lights and a software change. I really mean that. The line that you have to cross today is such that effectively what you're having to build for the motorsports, for the circuit, is so focused on speed and performance that when you bring it to the road market, to the aftermarket, you have to change it. In fact, you have to change it to such an extent, you're really talking about a different beast altogether. And there are obvious inherent inefficiencies in that, in how you can scale up what you learn and scale up what you do. And whilst, again, from what I've learned from the rules and what I've just coming to it new, I think the idea that motorsports drives innovation on the road, I think that probably exists at a conceptual level. It probably existed at a much more tangible level at some point. But these two worlds have diverged.